1 versus 100. Hi, I'm Dave Arnott, the Christian Economist. What we're looking at today is number 1, Hong Kong, versus number 100, China. The Heritage Foundation has something called the Index of Economic Freedom, which I highly recommend. It ranks 178 countries based on their economic freedom. Hong Kong is number 1, China is number 100. Let's look at why and see if we can find some biblical truths to help us understand what's going to happen in the current conflict between Hong Kong, a country of 9 million people, and China next door, a country of 1.4 billion. Well, first we have to define country. Hong Kong is not a country, but in many ways it's set apart in rankings such as this. And there's other rankings like the Index of Economic Freedom done by other people. Hong Kong and Singapore almost always come out number 1 and 2. So we look at this and try to figure out, in the current conflict between Hong Kong and China, what are they fighting for? Well, Hong Kong is fighting to remain number 1. They want to be the most economic free country in the world. They don't want to fall to number 100 like China is. So it's a complex formula. They have 4 categories in the Heritage Foundation's Index of Economic Freedom: rule of law, regulatory efficiency, government size, open markets. Under those 4, they have 3 additional. 12 is too many to cover in a 10-minute podcast on the Christian Economist. So let's look at just a couple of them. One of the major advantages for Hong Kong is property rights. We take this for granted in the United States. My students certainly do. I've joked with them, well, maybe partly seriously, about redistributing their grades, and they claim that their grades are their property, and I cannot redistribute them. I've had maybe 5,000 students in 28 years of teaching. I've offered every one of them to redistribute their grade to a student who earned an F because he didn't arrive for the class. They've all said, no, my grade is my property right. And see, they just assume that it would never be taken away from them. Well, property rights is one of the reasons Hong Kong has the most economic freedom. They do not have political freedom, by the way. We've often said in class also, the United States is the richest nation in the history of the world because of the really delicate intertwining of 3 different freedoms: religious freedom that came from the Judeo-Christian heritage, economic freedom that comes from our mostly free market capitalist system, and political freedom which comes from our form of democracy that is a republic. Intertwining of those 3 so perfectly is what has produced the U.S., 5% of the world's population that produces 23% of the world's GDP, the richest nation in the history of the world. But my subject is not the United States today, it's Hong Kong and China. So the first one we talk about is property rights. If we go over to government size, Hong Kong has a perfect score of 100 for fiscal health. You realize they have a budget surplus. The United States, we have a debt of $20.5 trillion. But again, I'm supposed to be comparing to China today. Isn't that right? So if you're looking back for this property rights thing, a really good book on this is called The Mystery of Capital by Hernando de Soto, a Peruvian economist. No kidding, I'm reading this book. I'm learning so much about how property rights became established in the United States, in my country, from a Peruvian economist. The Mystery of Capital is really a landmark book to tell us the value of property rights. The subtitle is Why Capitalism Triumphs in the West and Fails Everywhere Else. So let's look at our biblical view and see if we can figure out what's going on here. If you look at my website, davearnott.com, you'll see a little blue book. It's only 50 pages, called Economics and the Christian Worldview. Well, it explains our worldview that has only 3 elements: creation, we believe God created the world perfectly; fall, we believe we fallen humans have screwed it up; and redemption, we find spiritual redemption in the acceptance of Jesus Christ as our personal Savior. But in economics and in business, in all of our lives, all the realms of our lives, we are supposed to redeem the world back to what God intended. I don't have time to get into the details of that today, but to focus only on why is Hong Kong 1 and China number 100. Well, Hong Kong is economically free, but not politically free. Look, there was a book in 1992 called The End of History by Francis Fukuyama. And in The End of History, he said after the fall of the Soviet Union and China seemed to be opening up, he said it's the end of history, because he's predicting that all countries will be basically free market capitalist and basically some kind of a Republican democracy of some kind. Well, he was wrong, but I'm not here to diss Francis Fukuyama. His book makes a really interesting point. He was denying the second part of the Christian worldview, which you'll find in that little blue book, Economics and the Christian Worldview by Dave Arnott. The second part says fall, that we have a fallen nature. We believe that we can be redeemed, but we still maintain the fallen nature. As Jesus said, the poor will always be with you. There will always be trouble in the world. The question is, how do we deal with this trouble, and what do we do about this fall? Because we believe in the Christian world that we are Christian worldview, that we are fallen. Oh, let's look back at China and Hong Kong and find a couple of differences here. So the financial freedom in Hong Kong is a very, very high score, 90, whereas in China the score is 20. You have no financial freedom. Essentially, the Communist Party runs the country, and this is very well known. My point today is to look at the interesting differences between Hong Kong, who had 156 years of British rule. When the British gave up their lease after 99 years in 1997, many Hong Kongers, and really that is what they're called, many Hong Kongers left and went, some to the United States, but many to Canada, and you'll find a really burgeoning real estate market in Vancouver. As a matter of fact, in Canada they've put a 30% tax, excise tax, on people buying property from outside the country because so many Chinese want to get out of not only Hong Kong but mainland China because they want the economic freedom in Canada and they want the economic freedom in the United States. Again, I'm talking about Hong Kong and China today, but most of you listening to this are from the United States, so you'll be interested to know that there have been times in this economic freedom ranking where we've been as high as the top 10. During the Obama years, we fell 7 of those 8 years. Here's a quote from Anthony Kim writing on this subject in 2017. In fact, America's standing in the index has dwindled steadily during the Obama years. This largely owed to increased government spending, regulations, and a failed stimulus program that enriched the well-connected while leaving average Americans behind. End of quote by Anthony Kim at AK Freedom, writing in February of 2017. We have fallen as far as 17. In 2019, we're back up to 12, which is not bad. Economic freedom is good. I'll take more rather than less. The Hong Kongers would too. But you see, the point is, the Hong Kongers are fighting against the fallen nature. It's such an interesting time in the world. One of my favorite quotes is from Angus Deaton, teaches economics at Princeton, was the 2015 winner of the Nobel Prize in Economics. His book is called The Great Escape. It's how humans have escaped poverty. For thousands of years, humans were in penury. How did we make this great discoveries that started with the Industrial Revolution? How did we become so rich? And also, how did we become so free? The very first line of Angus Deaton's book, The Great Escape, is, as quoted, "Life is better now than almost any time in history." But because I'm an optimist, I just leave out the almost. Life is better now than any time in history. But why? We still have a fallen nature. See, totalitarian states and dictators, that's natural. Freedom is unnatural. How did we get here? These are the subjects we talk about in the Christian Economist. And today we're talking about Hong Kong being number 1 on the index of economic freedom, China being number 100. The Hong Kongers make $64,000 a year in purchase price parity when converted to US dollars. $64,000 a year. The Americans make $59,000. That's good. Both those numbers are good. Are you ready for the Chinese number? $18,000. This is why there are protests in Hong Kong today. They have economic freedom. They're afraid they're going to lose it. They don't want to go from number 1 on the index of economic freedom to number 100. They don't want to go from making $64,000 a year to making $18,000 a year. They have economic freedom. They do not have political freedom. I wish I had more time to talk today about the religious freedom. Perhaps much of that comes from the 156-year rule of the British, which ended in 1997. The second thing I want to mention just briefly, Sergei Seidamatov at Dallas Baptist University and I wrote a paper that was presented at the Christian Business Faculty Association in October of 2019 called the 10 Commandments of Economics, where we humbly tried to find what does God want us to do in economics. Number 6 for us was trade is good. Trade is good. Hong Kong has a very high ranking on trade when you look at the Index of Economic Freedom. This is what they're trying to protect from the communist Chinese who are trying to take it away. That's why there's protesters in the streets of Hong Kong today. There you go, the Christian worldview, creation, fall, redemption. We believe that we are fallen, but we can work our way out of it. The 10 Commandments of Economics, according to Sergei Seidamatov and Dave Arnott. Trade is good. That's what Hong Kong is fighting today, to remain number 1 and not be taken over by number 100. I'm Dave Arnott for the Christian Economist, where our motto is, fear God, tell the truth, earn a profit. See you next time.